Jeff Kerr, CBS Sports, is here to talk a little NFL, a little NFC East. As, man, oh man, so Jeff, Julio Jones apparently on live television today said, I'm out of Atlanta. I don't want to be here. He wants out of there. And immediately the Eagles fans are saying, you got to get this guy. You got to get this guy. 32 years old, making $15 million on cap guaranteed. So are the Eagles even a player for Julio Jones?
I don't think they're considered a player, but they probably should be a player because they have the draft capital to become a player. And as long as you have that draft capital, and I was talking about this on the Pick Six podcast today for CBS, as long as you have 3 first-round picks, you're going to be a player for Julio Jones. It doesn't matter if they actually are or not because they have a first-round pick they can afford to give away. And they were 4th in the NFL in fewest receiving yards last year. They should be a player. I'd be interested. I'd love to hear what Devonta Smith, an Alabama guy who probably has interacted with Julio Jones from time to time. But Julio wants to be traded to a contender. And that's the biggest issue there. Would he actually want to come to Philadelphia? My guess is no.
Yeah, 32 years old, had some injury issues there. Is that a concern there? Is the fact that, hey, are we getting this guy at the back end of his career? Or do you think that he's still a guy that can be highly productive and that would be worth taking the risk?
Well, before last year, I think he only missed 2 total games over his last 5 years. And again, he was still very productive when he played last year. He was 7th in the NFL in receiving yards per game. He's still not a bad player. He's still one of the best receivers in the National Football League. My biggest issue with Julio Jones isn't his injuries. It's not his injury history. It's the fact that he just doesn't catch a lot of touchdowns. He only has like 63, 64 career touchdowns for a guy who has the most receiving yards through a player's first 135 games. The guy's a productive player, and if he can make your team better and probably make you a contender in the NFC East, if you truly believe you're good enough to compete for this division, you call the Falcons and say, hey, what would it take to get Julio Jones?
Yeah, that's a big question is, do they think they're a contender? I mean, we saw Shane Steichen over the weekend talk about how good the offensive line. He says, man, when I watch this team, my eyes go right to the offensive line, even when I'm watching the skill players. He says, we have one of the best offensive lines in football. So when I hear that, I'm wondering if, hey, the offensive coaches on this team are saying, man, if we can just get a veteran receiver in here, that could be a difference maker. So would Julio Jones be a difference-making player for the Eagles?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, he's a difference-making player for Devonta Smith. He's a difference-making player for Jalen Reagor. Can you imagine Julio Jones and Devonta Smith lined up together on this offense and Jalen Reagor in the slot? I actually believe you have one of the best receiving corps in all of football all of a sudden. And we still don't even know what Jalen Reagor is. We still don't know what Devonta Smith is. We think we know what Devonta Smith is. I'm pretty sure I know what Devonta Smith is. He's a baller. He's a game changer. And you know what? If you give up a first-round pick, we were talking about this today, earlier, and I mentioned I was on Pick Six podcast with Will Brinson. You are essentially trading Carson Wentz for Julio Jones. Think about that.
Yeah, I mean, that's a pretty interesting way to look at it. I mean, to me, Julio Jones, you mentioned, like, Julio Jones plays right now with Calvin Ridley, and those two guys, the problem is that team doesn't win a whole heck of a lot. So what is the reason?
Well, they don't win because they don't have an offensive line or an offensive line that they think's good. They don't have a defense, and they were poorly coached.
Well, exactly. So I was going to say, you have those two receivers. Atlanta hasn't won a whole heck of a lot. Why? Well, their offensive line's not all that good. Their defense is wretched. But with the Eagles being a similar spot, that you're getting a player in here and that you would turn into the Falcons, a team that has great weapons, poor defense.
Again, I don't even think the Eagles would have a poor defense because we know how good their front four is. We think we know their linebacking core is better than what they were last year with Eric Wilson and Alex Singleton. I'm a little concerned about their secondary, and we've talked about this time in and time out, Mike, but Julio Jones could be the difference between a 7-win team and a 9-win team. And in the NFC East, that might be enough. And in my opinion, the Eagles are just going to get better after this year anyway because they're going to have the draft capital. They're going to have salary cap space to clear up. And, yeah, you're taking on a lot of money this year for Julio Jones and for the remainder, 2 years on his contract after this year. But still, you got a player that is just going to ball out for you night in and night out.
The big money's this year. The big money's this year. There's $15 million guaranteed this year. After this, there's only $2 million in guarantees next year. And I think the final year, you're kind of absolved of them. Jeff Kerr, CBS Sports, you tweeted earlier, last 5 times the Eagles finished last in the NFC East, the result the following season. They made the playoffs every single time they finished last. So a move like this would suggest, hey, we finished last, but we want to make the playoffs.
Yeah, absolutely. I honestly think if the Eagles get Julio Jones, my expectations would increase. Not tremendously, because I still don't know what the Eagles have in Jalen Hurts yet. I think I do. I think Jalen Hurts is a good quarterback, but we'll see. He has to. I got to put it this way. I don't want to hear about Jalen Hurts' completion percentage and he's growing if Julio Jones is here, because there should be no excuse. You should have to complete better than 52.9% of your passes.
Right.
My expectations go up for Jalen Hurts because he'll have weapons that Carson Wentz never had. He'll have Julio Jones. He'll have Devonta Smith. He'll have Miles Sanders. He'll have Dallas Goedert. Heck, you know what? And the Eagles are going to clear up cap space anyway for this guy if they decide to get rid of Zach Ertz. You're basically also flipping Julio Jones for Zach Ertz in the same realm. I don't want to see him do that, but that's probably what they're going to have to do. So, yeah, my expectations will go up because you are getting a prime ball player. It's almost like the Eagles getting, dare I say it, Terrell Owens. They're just not on the cusp of winning a Super Bowl, but they would be on the cusp of going to the playoffs.
Yeah, this will be interesting. If you're just tuning in, Julio Jones essentially said, I'm out of here. Doesn't want to be in Atlanta. Some reports have come out that he made a trade request, and so far the Falcons have not done anything about that. But it appears more and more likely that Julio Jones will be out of Atlanta. We know he doesn't want to go to Dallas, so what other teams are in play?
Well, if I'm the Kansas City Chiefs, I'm calling. If I'm the Baltimore Ravens, I'm calling, because that's the difference between those two winning another Super Bowl, honestly. I think the Ravens are a wide receiver away from actually being a Super Bowl team. And Sammy Watkins just doesn't move the needle for me. I like Rashad Bateman. I think he's going to be a good player in this league, but I think they need more. I think they need that true veteran. And until John Harbaugh, stops doing this Andy Reid thing, and I know he's won a Super Bowl, but Andy Reid never really got wide receivers either for his star quarterback and Donovan McNabb for years. And then when he did, look what happened. They got over the NFC Championship game home. I think if the Ravens get Julio Jones, they'll be unstoppable with Lamar Jackson. I think if the Kansas City Chiefs get Julio Jones, wrap it up. I think they go to Super Bowl and win it no matter what, because Patrick Mahomes will have him and Tyreek Hill. You're unbeatable. I'll tell you another team I would probably give a call to just to make a certain quarterback happy. That's the Green Bay Packers. I would say, what does it take to get this guy? Why not? Try to make this guy happy and then say, hey, Aaron, look, shut up. We got this guy for you.
Right.
We made a deal to go to a Super Bowl. You have him. You have Devontae Adams. You have Aaron Jones. We brought him back. We're a little weaker on the offensive line. We're a little weaker defensively. Shut up. We got you everything you need. If you don't want to be here, I can't help you.
And look, I've said from the beginning, I think Aaron Rodgers ends up playing in Green Bay. I just don't see them moving him out. But stranger things have happened. But when you have a quarterback like that, they have it's either he doesn't play and doesn't get paid, or he plays in Green Bay. That's the way I see it kind of working out.
And he has a future. He doesn't have to play football this year if he doesn't want to.
Jeff Kerr, CBS Sports. Next week, June 1st will be here. So why is June 1st a big day in the NFL calendar?
Oh, all those cap problems clear up. That post-June 1st deadline. I think we could see Aaron Rodgers, Julio Jones, these guys get traded because teams are going to shed a significant amount of cap space because of the post-June 1st deadline. We always hear June 1st, June 1st, June 1st. Well, all of a sudden, releasing Zach Ertz saves the Eagles $12 million compared to, $4 million? That's a big difference in cap space. And that's why I think you're going to see Zach Ertz move. That's why I think you're going to see a bunch of these veterans. It's not going to be as many as we think, but it's going to be guys that teams have been trying to trade and just haven't been able to do it. Now all of a sudden teams are going to be maybe a little more active. I'm not going to say they're going to do it during their mandatory minicamp period, but June, July, you could see a couple deals go down because of this.
Yeah, June 1st is Tuesday, so that's a big day of the NFL calendar. And it really means, all right, so over at, looking at some of these free agents, when you're looking over the free agents that are out there still and some of the moves that are still being made, you get a guy like, there's some interesting veterans still out there. Steve Nelson, we know. Richard Sherman is still out there. Do any of those two guys, Nelson, Sherman, we know they both make sense for Philadelphia, but do you anticipate that either one would sign here?
I think Sherman is going to sign with somebody sooner or later. I still have Sherman. If he goes anywhere, I think he's going to be with the Saints because of his familiarity with that defense. I always thought maybe the Dallas Cowboys could be in play for Richard Sherman. I just don't see him going there, even with the Dan Quinn factor. Something tells me he's going to stay out west, where he goes to the Raiders because of the familiarity with their scheme, whether he goes to back to the Seattle Seahawks or stays with San Francisco 49ers. I ultimately think he's going to stay in San Francisco because the 49ers are going to say to themselves, look, we don't need you, but we need you.
Yeah.
Like you're a luxury, and we can afford a luxury like you because we feel we're good enough to go to the Super Bowl. So I think he goes there. Steve Nelson, I think the Eagles will be a significant player for him in the long run. But we have talked about this, Mike, the trade market. Who's going to be available in there? If the Eagles feel like parting ways with a third, fourth round pick is better than getting a guy like Steve Nelson, I think they make a move. But if Steve Nelson is the best option available, I think they go for it, and they have their QB, their CB too.
How about Geno Atkins, the defensive tackle? I mean, I think the Eagles, now they drafted 2 guys at tackle, but you're really asking 2 rookies to kind of be a part of that rotation. Does Atkins interest you at all?
I think defensive tackle is the one position where you can get immediate contribution because you're not asking too much. Remember all the years before, Mike, when they had Paul Grass-Mass and Sam Rayburn and guys like that, they were able to get production out of those guys. And we saw it throughout the year. I mean, we saw it with Hassan Ridgeway. You don't have to pay top money, but if you can get a player like Geno Atkins who can line up on the outside, who can line up it inside, is better on the inside, but you can rush him on third down on the outside. Competition is always good, and Nick Sirianni has preached competition. I wouldn't be against Geno Atkins being here if it doesn't cost much, and it doesn't look like he would cost much at this point. It's like a Ryan Kerrigan son. You bring a guy in with high character.
Yeah, K'Wan Shorts, another tackle, Sheldon Richardson. There's a couple defensive tackles. I feel like Philly may need to add a veteran tackle and then the 2 rookies maybe battle it out as that 4th guy. So those 3 guys are all veterans who have been players in this league. And then the other guy who's still a free agent that's interesting, there's a couple of them, but how about on the defensive side of the ball? Is KJ Wright a guy you have any interest in?
I'd love to have KJ Wright with the Eagles. I just don't see him as a fit in this defense. I ultimately think he goes back to Seattle.
All right, Jeff Kerr, CBS Sports. And then, of course, there's still the Zach Ertz thing. I don't know how that ends, but I saw a proposed trade today that sends him to Buffalo for a 7th-round pick. I mean, if you end up getting just a 7th-rounder, man, that's a disappointing. You don't trade him.
I wouldn't trade him. Not for a 7th-round pick. I don't want to hear, well, we got something. No, this is a franchise pillar. I'm sorry. I think you have to get at least a 4th-round pick for this guy, or you keep him. And if you really want to cut him and create cap space, and that's what you do, and you make him happy, and then he can go to Indianapolis or Buffalo or wherever he kind of wants to go. But unless you get a 4th-round pick for this guy, I wouldn't do it. You're better off having him.
Jeff Kerr, CBS Sports. Obviously, there's a lot going on. As we mentioned, that June 1st date is going to be here next week. So keep an eye on that because that could be another active period in the NFL. And obviously, there's a lot going on with the Eagles at their voluntary camps. But over the weekend, it was interesting. They kind of struck a deal to get these veteran players to come to the voluntary camps by saying, we won't make you do the mandatory camps. So the Eagles have a lot of guys that are there, and they have a media tomorrow, so we'll get more from Nick Sirianni. We got Gannon over the weekend. We got Steichen over the weekend. Anything stick out from those guys?
Just Jonathan Gannon. The guy just sounds like an NFL head coach. I think we talked about this. Did we talk about Friday, Mike? Or Jonathan Gannon?
I think we hit on that. Yep.
Yeah, and he just sounded like an NFL head coach. Steichen, I didn't get to hear most of his press conference. I did get the transcripts, though. I was pretty impressed with what he had to say. And again, I knew all I needed to know about Shane Steichen when I interviewed Justin Herbert back in February when he said, look, Shane Steichen is the reason why I was as good as I was this past year. And I think Justin Herbert's going to miss Shane Steichen a bit, and I think he's going to really help Jalen Hurts. I think it's going to be a huge move for the Eagles and that coaching staff. That was a great hire by Nick Sirianni to bring him in.
Gannon, I left impressed with Gannon. Steichen's interesting. I like the fact that he zoned in on the offensive line. And to me, that's the story of this team. That offensive line being back and healthy. That is the story I'm telling if I'm the Eagles. And Steichen nailed it. He said, I put on the film and I watched the skill players and I went right to the offensive line. We've got one of the best lines in football. And he's right. If ... they are healthy.
And honestly, Mike, that's how they've made the playoffs every year after coming in last, because their offensive line has always been good every single one of those years. With Andy Reid, with Chip Kelly, with Doug Peterson, their strength is always in the trenches.
Correct.
And the offensive line, it's going to be the same way. I don't think this offensive line is just going to fall off a cliff with these guys healthy.
Jeff Kerr, CBS Sports, at Jeff Kerr, CBS. And, of course, he, like all guests, appeared via the Boardwalk Honda hotline as June 1st. Keep that date. It's a week from tomorrow. We'll have plenty more as the free agent stuff happens. All right, Jeff, we'll talk to you Wednesday, man.
Yep, sounds great, Mike. By the way, tomorrow, Eagles game-by-game predictions. It's way too early. I'm usually on the money with this. Last year, I was off a lot, but normally I'm pretty close, and I wasn't super optimistic, but I think the Eagles are going to be a little better than what other people think.
All right, check that out over at CBS Sports, at Jeff Kerr, CBS, and we'll go over that on Wednesday's show. All right, man?
Yep, sounds great. Thanks for having me on, Mike.
All right, Jeff Kerr, like all guests, appeared via the Boardwalk Honda hotline. He's back on Wednesday and Friday as we talk to Jeff here on the Sports Bash.